With the release of Super Mario RPG on the horizon, there are a few big questions that have been stuck in my head ever since the announcement that could very well determine the future of Mario RPGs, and even Nintendo in general, so I think we should discuss that. This remake is definitely one of the most loyal in terms of sticking to the original material, but there are a few changes popping up that confuse me a bit. Obviously, we have new additions like the triple move and boss refights, which are very welcome additions. In general, even though the remake is incredibly faithful, there's still small details here and there that make me question how much they plan on adjusting. I'll be the first to admit, I've never finished the original and I don't remember that much, but I can still tell apart some changes. The door containing the secret boss has gotten its color changed, which could mean nothing or perhaps a change in the boss somehow. I do hope Coolx, the boss in question, does retain his design, and it would be cool if he was HD 2D instead of a 3D model. I think it'd be a nice nod to how in the original Japanese script, Coolx described Mario & Co.'s power as something from the third dimension, which they were in 3D technically, just very compressed onto the SNES, so it makes sense for him to say 2D in the remake. But unnecessary rambling aside, that door color change likely doesn't mean the boss itself has changed. Maybe just a minor adjustment for accessibility, I'm not sure. A bigger change is that they are changing the names of some characters to the original names in the Japanese script, which makes sense. It's unclear if this is basically the majority of the characters of the games or just the few shown on the Nintendo UK site. While this change makes sense, it's a much bigger one. Literally the names that people have come to know for like the past 20 years, Neo Squid, are just erased, and it would normally be fine besides the fact that everything else in the remake seems to be 100% faithful. So it brings the question, will there be other bigger changes? It's likely, but it's also confusing as to why they would change several things that were perfectly fine considering most parts of the game are perfectly fine as is like in the original. And of course, they're already fine keeping most of the other stuff the same. Also, they got rid of Mario's peace sign. These are the real Mario mandates. Next, I want to look at this more broadly. What does this mean for the future of Mario RPG? Will we get a sequel if the remake does well? Could we get a sequel? It's very possible if it does do well, which I'm sure it will. Nintendo and Square Enix might just not want to touch on the legacy of this gem, which I 100% get, but when even the original director said that he wanted to retire with a sequel to Mario RPG, I think it's possible. Obviously, if there was a sequel though, Square Enix would be involved, and as of the recording of this, we really don't know how they'd feel about a sequel, nor how they feel about the remake in general. For all we know, Nintendo could have had to beg Square Enix to make this remake, or it was the complete opposite and Square wanted to make the remake. We really don't know, but if you ask me, I'm pretty sure it was Nintendo begging, or at least they were moderately wanting to make the remake. They definitely know how beloved this game is, and they have definitely seen the whole Geno for Smash campaign. They added him as a Mii for a reason. And based on the new content there likely is outside of what we've been told, it's clear that the developers want to do more of this world of Mario RPG. And who wouldn't, to be honest? There's so much unique characters and locations, there's really a lot they could do in terms of the sequel. I really hope that this remake strengthens Nintendo's relationship with Square further. While Square does publish a lot of their games, especially RPGs on the Switch, it'd be nice to see their relationship working together on games as a whole improve more. So maybe we can get more stuff outside of Mario RPG? Zelda RPG? Outside of a potential sequel, this remake opens a whole can of games that people thought were impossible to be remade. Obviously, while I'm not expecting something like Mother 3 to be remade, but I would love that of course, it makes the idea of other games like Chibi Robo, F-Zero, Kirby Air Ride, Kid Icarus Uprising much more plausible. Even games that may seem unlikely to be remade can be due to fan demand and how we saw it here with the Thousand Year Door on Switch. Obviously, just because we get 2 miracles in a row doesn't mean that we'll get them all, but we can at least hope. And at least it doesn't make things a bit more likely. Now, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Who is even making this? Nintendo and Square Enix are credited for the game obviously, but it's unclear if it is Nintendo, Square Enix, or some other studio we don't even know about. So let's look through some of our options and try to pin it down to one studio. Internally at Nintendo would be possible, but I kinda doubt it. With most of their internal teams likely very focused on next-gen games, I'm positive they'd rather outsource it and oversee development. Square Enix is possible, but outside of just assisting, I'm not sure they'd have a full team available to work on the project. It is very likely they're assisting in development though, knowing how protective Square likely feels about this game, especially if the theory that the reason Geno isn't in Smash was because Square was being stingy and overprotective. Now let's dive into second-party studios. Toast was brought up, a studio that's been working with Nintendo for decades and did work on several RPGs before, and have just recently been on a streak co-developing with Square, with already having one releasing this year and another released last year. Toast also has a staggering 630 employees as of last year, so if they did want to pump out this remake, it's possible. There's also Grezzo, who did recently just make the Miitopia remake in 2021. But just this past summer, they just finished work on a Japan-exclusive Apple Arcade game. But with over 80 employees, it is possible that they are the developers, but I feel like they would wait till after the Apple Arcade game to go fully into development on a next-gen game. ND Cube is possible. They're the developers for the Mario Party games, so it would align with their release schedule as they haven't had a game in over 2 years now. And unfortunately, they don't seem to be working on DLC for Mario Party Superstars. Although I do get the feeling that they might be the ones working on Princess Peach Showtime, another game we don't know the developers for. Camelot is also possible, the developers of the Mario Sports games, but they could be another contender for Princess Peach Showtime. In general, it's probably not going to be a studio that consistently focuses on one IP like Camelot or ND Cube. After doing a bit more research according to Moby Games, which can be very hit or miss, Alpha Dream had roughly 70 in-house developers working on their last big game, the Bowser's Inside Story remake. As I said several times before, the devs all split up to different studios, but around roughly 40 developers haven't been credited for any new title yet, according to Moby Games. We'll have to cut some out due to a lot of them likely retiring, some being credited but work at much smaller companies that aren't credited on Moby Games, but it is possible that some former developers from Alpha Dream are working on the remake. We've already gotten clarification that the original director isn't working on it, but it is possible that some of the original developers were recruited onto the project. Is it very likely? No, but do I have faith maybe we'll get one? Yeah. Obviously, this is just if the developers themselves would want to, but finishing their careers working on the remake of Mario RPG would be a perfect send-off to a lot of their legacies. A lot of Alpha Dream veterans came from working on Mario RPG back at Square. It would be going full circle. Of course, this is just wishful thinking, but I can dream. At the end of the day, it's very likely Tosei or another outside studio, and we'll find out in a little over a month when the game releases. Buy it, please. Nintendo needs to get the memo that people love actual Mario RPGs. No offense to modern Paper Mario.